aviation is unique because it evokes a lot of passion. You know, people, for some reason, people care about flying an awful lot, and it's not just in a way to get from A to B. I don't really know how to say it. It's like, it brings out the best in people. It's a huge responsibility to do the right thing and come to the right conclusion for your peers that are out in the fleet. It's a big deal.
You go from the two-dimensional road system to a three-dimensional airspace, but you're not constrained to the places that they've paved.
Exploration, it's wired into the human DNA. Whether it's driving yourself to get to the top of Mount Everest, whether you're Shackleton trying to lead a team across the Antarctic, whether you're the first astronauts, going to the moon.
And those guys, that were the first people to flip into a rocket, go to space. I'm sure they all had the same feeling of, I don't really know what's going to happen, but we're going to go do it.
That is the human condition of exploration. That is in our DNA, and it brings teams together.
September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. Warsaw becomes the first major European city systematically destroyed from the air. With this new war, the age of air dominance has begun, and the United States is not ready. The U.S. enters World War II behind in air power, a result of isolationist policy and limited investment. But due to a few aviation visionaries, a foundation has been laid. On January 28, 1911, Lieutenant Theodore Gordon Spuds Ellyson takes off in a Curtiss grasscutter biplane, becoming Naval Aviator No. 1 and the Navy's first test pilot. Not deterred by the lack of funding for naval aviation, aircraft designer Glenn Hammond Curtiss personally trains Ellyson for the flight, with support from Navy Captain Washington Irving Chambers. Even with this milestone, aviation receives little funding or attention from naval leadership over the next decade. That begins to change in 1921. Congress establishes the Bureau of Aeronautics and appoints Rear Admiral William Moffett as chief. On March 22nd of the following year, the U.S. Navy commissions its first aircraft carrier, the USS Langley. And on January 1st of 1923, Moffett establishes the flight test section at NAS Anacostia. By the early 1930s, naval aviation has gained institutional footing, but it remains a dangerous and evolving field. On the evening of April 3, 1933, Moffett boards the USS Akron in Langhurst, New Jersey, for a planned air demonstration involving Curtiss Sparrowhawk fighters. The flight demonstration is canceled due to rough weather, so the Sparrowhawks remain grounded. But one pilot, Lieutenant Commander Frederick Trapnell, waits on standby for the signal to take off in a small ferry plane to join the Akron. An experienced combat pilot, Trapnell has recently completed a tour with the flight test section in Anacostia. As the hours pass and no signal comes, Trapnell grows increasingly concerned. By morning, news breaks. The Akron has gone down in a storm off the Atlantic coast. 73 of 76 aboard are dead, including Moffett. The loss is staggering and deeply personal. Dozens of friends are gone. Trapnell, spared only by circumstance, carries the weight of that night for the rest of his life. The tragedy deepens his resolve. Aircraft must be made not only powerful, but survivable. As the unrest in Europe and Asia escalates into war, it becomes clear that the success of fighter aircraft will be tactically critical in securing victory. If the U.S. is pulled into the war without the needed flight capabilities, they will be defeated in the air.
There was a cadre of testers up at Anacostia from the early 19-teens up through the late 1930s. Probably the best known one is a gentleman named Trapnell.
Trapnell first joined the Anacostia Flight Test Section in January 1930, one of just 5 team members. In those early years, flight test was more art than science, unstandardized and undefined. Through rigorous experimentation, discussion, and documentation, the fledgling team began to shape the field, establishing standard procedures and creating a new lexicon to describe the complex behavior of aircraft. In May of 1940, Trapnell rejoins the team as a senior flight test officer. It's a new era. Gone are the early days of shaping the developing field. Test is now inseparably linked to the looming threat of conflict. With one clear mission: create a fighter that can win the war. Aspects of testing are completed at multiple locations, adding additional challenges to the process. With the Navy's test team working between multiple locations, it can take up to 4 years for a new aircraft to be approved for duty. But the Navy does not have this much time.
As early as the 1930s, the Navy recognized the need for consolidating its test functions. And then, of course, December 7th, it put everything in fast track.
Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor shatters the illusion that the United States is untouchable and propels the nation into war.
And a month later, the Secretary of the Navy authorized the design and construction of what was then known as Cedar Point.
Prior to the base establishment in 1941, Southern Maryland was one of the most isolated communities in the United States. 2 ships, the Ark and the Dove, had arrived in southern Maryland in the mid-1600s, making it one of the earliest European settlements in what would become the United States.
It was an area rich in wildlife, rich in fisheries, rich in food, and it was a perfect place for people to settle. And the Native American population, our archaeological research shows, goes back probably 12, 15, maybe even as far back as 20,000 years. And the Native American population faded out pretty quickly with the arrival of the European settlers.
The 6,400 acres selected for the base is already home to 3 small towns, several large plantations, and acres of prime farmland.
This landscape, if you could see it, I've studied the 1938 Department of Agriculture aerial photograph. It was agricultural land from shore to shore, farm fields, hardly a tree in sight.
In 1790, St. Mary's County had less than 15,000 people. When the Navy showed up in 1942, the St. Mary's County still had about 15,000 people. You would have seen names like Raleigh and Mattingly and Woodburn. These were names that had been here for 350 years. My grandsons can count back 10 generations of being here in St. Mary's County. Cedar Point had the best arable property in the county. There were some canning factories. They would can tomatoes in the summer, and they would can oysters in the winter. I can tell you from talking to all of them, and there were 13 aunts and uncles, they were very happy on Cedar Point. There was World War, and the locals were not happy about losing their homeland, but they were also patriots. They understood the need.
Ground is broken on the base on April 4th, 1942. Driven by wartime urgency, construction of the base begins before plans are even finished. With so much of the population called up for military duty, the early base construction effort was a catch-all for anyone able-bodied and available for work.
There were thousands and thousands of men living here, and the Navy would send buses out to bring workers in. And there was gambling. It was very much a Wild West.
Finally, on October 20th, 1942, the Marines are brought in to take over security. So many undocumented individuals are working on the base without the proper paperwork that it takes the Marines nearly 10 months to complete fingerprints, background checks, and finally secure the base and workforce. Over 2,000 arrests are made based on previous offenses discovered during the background checks. The Cedar Point Peninsula, where the rapid construction is taking place, is located at the confluence of the Patuxent River and the Chesapeake Bay. This remote location is in proximity to Washington, D.C., but away from air traffic congestion. This, which allows for weapons and aircraft testing, will be essential to the base's missions. But the remote location poses challenges as well. Intense modernization is required for the facilities and in establishing supply lines.
You can imagine the massive amount of materials that had to be brought in. There were no paved roads down here. In fact, the story goes that when the truck driver was headed down toward Pax to deliver something, they said, just follow the dust trail. And the big dust, because they had 3,000 people working on building the base, big earth movers, and lots and lots of equipment. What was known as the Farmers Railroad, the Navy took it over and made it a U.S. Navy railroad and extended it all the way down to what is now Gate 1. There wasn't enough electrical power in southern Maryland. So all of these things, the Navy bringing a railroad down, upgrading the electrical requirements in the southern Maryland communications, huge impact on a very rural agricultural environment.
With metal in short supply due to the war, new construction methods are needed to build aircraft hangars.
And in particular, the concrete hangars are very, very important because they were the largest poured-in-place concrete structures in the country at the time that they were built. And they had great big, huge forms that they poured these things with. Forms were on railroad tracks. They were poured in sections because they would just run that form out, cross the ramp, and build, and then start another one. And you go back into the 1940s engineering journal, and there is a paper, an engineering journal that it talks about these hangars. It was pretty innovative. It's a German design.
On April 1st, 1943, less than 1 year after construction began, Admiral John McCain officially commissions U.S. Naval Air Station Patuxent River. With wartime operations in full swing, it was all hands on deck.
So there were quite a few women here at Pax River in World War II.
So Roosevelt signed into law July 30th, 1942, the Reserve Act to allow women to join the Navy. And by the end of the year, like 5 months later, there were 26,000 women had enlisted.
At that point, they were designated waves, women accepted for volunteer emergency service.
We hope that many thousands more will join the Navy to volunteer their services as this second year goes by, encouraged by their parents, their husbands, their fiancés, their friends, to do their part to help the Navy help the nation.
There were 550 waves and 35 women officers which served at Pax during World War II. And they arrived at Pax River just about a week before the base was to be commissioned. They had been originally envisioned to clerical work, drivers and things like that. They got involved in technical, scientific research, meteorology. There were pilots, women pilots, used in World War II to ferry planes.
That were supporting flight operations. They ran the towers, they were air traffic controllers, doing a lot of work to relieve men to go over the pond.
After the war, the Navy realized how valuable the women had been, and so the Navy recognized the need to continue to allow women. So in 1948, they made the program permanent.
At the end of World War II, there was a huge cutback They were extremely limited as to how many there could be, what ranks they could attain, what jobs they could do, but they were still foot in the door.
With Allied forces hanging in the balance, there's little time to celebrate the collaborative feat of patriotic effort. While Pax River is still under construction, test team at Anacostia grapples with a serious problem. Japanese Zeros are outmaneuvering U.S. and Allied aircraft. Then, on July 10, 1942, the wreckage of a Japanese Zero is discovered by a U.S. patrol plane. Piloted by Tadayoshi Koga, the Zero had taken part in the infamous Midway operation in the Aleutian Islands. Hit by U.S. fire, its oil line was severed. Koga attempted a gear-down landing, but the plane flipped on the icy tundra, killing him instantly. The aircraft is remarkably intact. U.S. forces recover and restore it, offering engineers and pilots their first real look at the enemy's most feared fighter. As the flight test team is preparing to relocate to Pax River, Trapnell, along with Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders, tests the restored Zero against the U.S. fighter, the Corsair. With Sanders in the Zero and Trapnell in the Corsair, they fly a series of mock combat flights, confirming that the Zero, despite its speed and maneuverability, has significant shortcomings.
Pax River was a major test center for captured Japanese and German hardware during World War II.
For example, the Japanese Zero was very, very light, incredibly powerful, incredibly maneuverable. But the bad news was it was so light because it had no armament, it had no self-sealing tanks, it had no protection. If you could shoot them, it was a flying coffin. So we built the Hellcat, and when Grumman designed the Hellcat, it was designed with enough power it could match anything the Zero could do. And at the same time, it had armor plating everywhere, and it could absorb everything the Zero could shoot.
On October 21st, 1942, Trapnell traveled to Bethpage, New York, to fly the prototype XF6F3 Hellcat. Having just tested the Zero, he confirms the Hellcat is superior. The Navy needs the Hellcat immediately, but the standard approval process could take years. On Trapnell's recommendation, the Navy puts the Hellcat in combat in 1943. By the time formal approval is granted, the Hellcat has already downed more than 5,000 enemy aircraft. Its kill ratio is 19-1. The new fighter will account for 75% of the Navy's aerial victories in the war. At the same time, Nazi Germany is putting an incredible effort into weapons technology, including the first combat jet aircraft, the Me-262, and the stealth German U-boat.
At the end of World War II, the Germans were deploying all kinds of wonder weapons, and one of them was a brand new class of U-boat with anechoic tiles on it, rubber tiles on the submarine that could defeat sonar. It was an amazing invention. It was the miracle weapon of its time. It was a stealth submarine. As soon as it surrendered, of course, the Navy was very interested in why this ghost ship was invisible to us. Using the technology learned from the U-1105, we could start to see how we could defeat these anti-sonar measures.
With the new technology and tactical knowledge emerging from Pax River, the Allies begin to gain an advantage in Europe and the Pacific. In addition, the work done at Pax River during World War II continues to influence naval technology to this day.
Anechoic tiles are used to this day. It's part of the basis and genesis of the coatings and materials that we use to make our submarines more stealthy today. And when it came time to dispose of these aircraft, sometimes the solution was dig a hole, push it in, and cover it up. Other times the solution was push it into the water. Yes, indeed, there is a U-boat in the Potomac River, and it's one of ours.
The forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe.
Much remains to be done. The victory won in the West must now be won in the East.
As the war draws to a close and Pax River becomes the center of naval aviation testing, the need to train test pilots becomes more acute. In the final year of the war, Commander Sidney Sherby arrives at Pax River, an aviator, flight instructor, and aeronautical engineer fresh from postgraduate training at MIT. Within months, he's chosen to lead the Navy's first flight test pilots indoctrination program, designing the curriculum himself. In May of 1945, a class of 14 pilots and engineers graduates the first informal course in Navy flight test. A year later, Commander Trapnell arrives at Pax River as the new head of flight test.
Trapnell came down here in the mid-40s and started a test establishment. And so we need to figure out what it is that needs to be taught and how we need to teach it.
Trapnell spends 2 weeks filling the margins of Sherby's curriculum with notes, firing off question after question. So many that Sherby braces for a complete rewrite. But when his review is complete, Trapnell apologizes and thanks Sherby for the crash course. He declares the curriculum perfect. He was not challenging the material, he explains. He was learning it. Despite being an architect of the Navy's test pilot program, Trapnell has never had formal engineering training. The material was entirely new. Sherby later described Trapnell as having uncanny engineering instincts. Trapnell begins sitting in regularly on Sherby's classes. Inspired by the experienced and enthusiastic pilots, he lobbies for a formal test pilot school. In 1948, the Navy formally establishes a dedicated training program for test pilots at Pax River, with Sherby as its founding director.
This is where the academic groundwork is laid. Calculus, thermodynamics, plane and spherical trigonometry, progressions and infinite series, Cartesian coordinates, and aerodynamics.
On June 25, 1950, North Korea invades the South, launching the Korean War and the first military action of the Cold War. The U.S. mobilizes. The Cold War sparks a decades-long arms race, accelerating test programs at Pax River. The beginning of the Cold War coincides with the advent of the jet turbine engine, pushing Navy aircraft to new heights and speeds, and introducing entirely new challenges. By this time, Frederick Trapnell has become the first naval aviator to fly a jet aircraft, the Bell XP-59A Aerocomet. This experience helps guide aircraft test into the jet age. The Navy's wooden carrier decks are no match for the sheer force of the new jet aircraft. Pax River must adapt.
NATC, Patuxent River, Maryland, is located on a 6,800-acre tract bordering Chesapeake Bay. On the ground, the extensive facilities of the center are used to test and evaluate the enormous range of requirements special to naval aviation on the compatibility of the airplane with the aircraft carrier.
The aspect that makes naval aviation completely unique is the fact that we land aircraft on boats.
In 1954, Pax River builds a steam catapult with arresting gear called the TC-7.
The TC-7 is a very important capability that Pax has.
It is flush with the runway. If you don't know what you're looking at, it just looks like another piece of pavement with some exposed steel. And then underneath that catapult track is the same system that you would see underneath the flight deck on an aircraft carrier. However, ours is, of course, not powered by a couple of nuclear reactors. It's powered by a set of boilers.
I don't know how many 70-plus-year-old pieces of equipment that are used almost on a daily basis that are still being used in cutting-edge technological developments and testing and research that like TC-7 is. So it's a very important capability.
Another major challenge in the early jet age was the high incidence of aircraft mishaps and the high rate of lethality for testers.
We had, unfortunately, a high accident rate. The aircraft motors that we have today are much, much better than the motors we had in the old days. We didn't have the instrument landing systems that you have today. That stuff didn't exist. There were no computers.
Around 1950 is when we started going supersonic in aircraft. And of course, the aerodynamics around a craft changes when you do that. We were going from high-performance, propeller-driven aircraft to jet aircraft. The technology was not forgiving to people that didn't understand it.
So one of Pax River's darkest days was on June 7th, 1960. And inbound is a 57A bomber, which is an Air Force bomber. They're approaching Pax, and there's an explosion in the cockpit of this massive tactical bomber.
Mayday, going down.
Pax River has the longest runway in the local area, so they decide they're going to orbit Pax River, call the experts, and try to figure out how to recover this bomber. And they decide it's time to eject. So they point the aircraft toward the Chesapeake Bay. The force of the ejection pushes the aircraft off course, and it begins a big spiral over Pax River in St. Mary's County, and eventually settles out on a course and starts drifting right down Great Mills Road, headed to the worst possible place it can go, which is Great Mills High School. The bomber skims across the athletic fields and slams into the woods behind the school. This sends a fireball up into the sky. The Air Force dispatched 2 helicopters from Andrews to aid in the search and rescue operations. The helicopters retrieved the pilots and brought them back to the air operations area. And our fire department is down there helping fight the fire. They begin to get things under control, and everyone is breathing a sigh of relief over the near miss. But an hour and 4 minutes later, a Marine Corps captain named Captain Parsons is on the catapult with an F-8 Crusader fighter aircraft. The catapult's launched, and the aircraft staggers into the air, immediately in distress. Eyewitness said the aircraft stalls only about 100 feet off the end of the catapult. The pilot ejects, the engine goes into full power and slams into one of the helicopters that is just taking off to return back to Andrews Air Force Base. The helicopter explodes, killing both on board, falls into the ambulance that was waiting right below it, killing both the medical personnel in the ambulance. The crippled aircraft, now fragmenting and disintegrating, continues up toward the air operations building in the control tower and comes to rest on the hill beside the aircraft control tower, spewing burning jet fuel into the parking lot, setting a dozen cars ablaze and causing second and third degree burns to many of the bystanders. Now we have this intense fire going on, starting to consume the buildings and the vehicles in the parking lot. And the fire department is down at Great Mills High School, having to fight their way back through all the concerned parents who were swarming to their way toward the school. When it's all over, a dozen cars were destroyed, 4 people are dead, dozens are hospitalized with critical burns.
Every street on base is named for those who lost their lives in an aircraft test mishap.
The mishap rate in the Navy was about 3.5 per 100,000 flight hours. The mishap rate at the test center here was about 69 per 100,000 flight hours. So 20 times basically what the Navy Marine Corps' average was.
How do you cope with the loss of somebody you love and respect? And it's as hard for me as it is for anybody else. Yeah, you miss the people who are gone, and you live for the people who are still pressing.
The issues of carrier suitability and lethality highlight the need for intricate communication between engineers and test pilots, also known as project officers.
Naval aviation today is diversification.
Engineers, really wanted to say, just tell me what you want build and I'll build to it. The pilots will say, well, I want the aircraft to handle well. I want it to behave the way I want it to behave. And it wasn't until we started putting pilots and engineers in the cockpit together and they shared this experience that they were able to articulate both of those things in a way that allowed us to build aircraft that satisfied the need.
Training pilots and engineers takes a central role in addressing the new challenges faced in the jet age. On June 12, 1958, the program becomes the United States Naval Test Pilot School.
You've got to remember, back in the old days, there were no computers. There was never a 2-seat Hellcat or a 2-seat Corsair, which meant that your first flight in the airplane was the first flight. So the instructor pilot couldn't be in the airplane with you. So what they would do, the student lines up and he's in one airplane, The instructor is in another airplane, and you would do what they call a section takeoff. The student would sit there, and he's trying to feel the airplane out, and you could just see it start moving. The instructor pilot would move out, and it's basically talk. And as they're sorting it out, then they'd come back together. By the end of the first flight, they'd come back into the field for the entry, what they call the break turn. And basically, you would see the student just do a perfect break turn followed by the instructor.
Well, if you look at what tools were available to testers in the 60s and 50s and 40s, and before that, from the dawn of aviation, we live in a world where we can find out so much about what an air vehicle is going to do without ever doing it, that buys down a ton of risk to the operator. I would say I still have not, put the straps on a V-22 and not had a clear idea of what the outcome was probably going to be. And I think that is the biggest difference between, testing and the right stuff guys who, there are people, there's a room full of people with slide rules who are going to tell you what they think is going to happen. To accept that risk and not know the answer is what I think all of us now would do, but we don't have to.
For we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance.
The military importance of high ground has been recognized for thousands of years, but during the Cold War, with technology advancing and tensions increasing, Russia and the United States lift their sights to new heights. In April 1959, 4 test pilot school graduates, John Glenn, Wally Schirra, Alan Shepard, and Scott Carpenter, were among the first 7 astronauts selected by NASA.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Naval Test Pilot School has played a small part in that. Putting people on the moon, the astronaut program, a lot of that early training for those future astronauts happened at Naval Test Pilot School, and then after their flight test careers, thousands of people have banded together on an idea. You don't put a man on the moon because you pay for it. You have to get the team together, and they have to all want to push in the same direction.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
And it came to somebody like President Kennedy coming in and unifying the thought in people's minds, and then it just took off by itself.
This evening, I came here to speak to you about Vietnam. Vietnam is the scene of a powerful aggression that is spurred by an appetite for conquest.
The defense of freedom is everybody's business. If the level of enemy activity significantly increases, I shall not hesitate to take strong and effective measures to deal with that situation.
In March 1965, the United States enters into a conflict with Vietnam. In the early days of the war, the United States is losing more aircraft than the enemy. This causes a renewed focus on the development of advanced attack aircraft, like the Douglas A-4 Skyhawk, the Grumman A-6A Intruder, and the Vought A-7A Corsair II. Supersonic fighters, such as the Vought F-8 Crusader and McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II, are also introduced into combat. All of these aircraft went through testing at Pax River. The 1970s saw budgets cut, but progress continued at Pax River with the testing of aircraft like the AV-8 Harrier and the F-14 Tomcat.
My career path started with Navy ROTC. Lieutenant Karen Thornton and I were assigned to 2-month deployments on NATO exercises. Captain Jerry Brest was our skipper. He says, "Well, Colleen, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know. And he'd gone flying with me that day, and he said, "Have you ever considered test pilot school?" I applied and found out 2 months later that I had, in fact, been selected for the class, which surprised me and worried me because I was not an engineer at Purdue University. My second interview was with the XO, the executive officer. He looked at me and he said, "I expect you to work hard. If you can make it, you will make it." My classmates could not have been more supportive. Everybody helped everybody. And that's about the only way to get through the crucible, if you will, of the Navy test pilot school. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I've never worked so hard. It was a very proud moment to have my name called along with the other 30 members of my class at the graduation to just be announced as a graduating member of the class of '83. I don't think I stopped smiling for a week.
The 1980s ushered in policies of peace through strength, and Pax saw an explosive hiring increase.
We've heard the phrase, peace through strength, so often. Its meaning has become blurred through overuse. A time has come for America to recall once more the basic truths behind the familiar words.
In 1985, there was quite a, kind of the Reagan buildup of hiring that was going on here locally. Yeah, human resources in those days was very busy.
So I came for an interview. I'm a Reagan-era hire, and I said they would hire anyone because I'm a civil engineer, 5'2", from West Virginia, and they hired me. I truly did not know anything about naval aviation. I thought the Navy was ships.
As the United States moves through the Vietnam and Cold War, the Navy's aircraft undergo a major transition. Once designed for a single role, air combat or ground attack, aircraft begin evolving into versatile, multi-role platforms.
When I started here, it was an analog Navy. It wasn't a digital Navy. So A6s, A7s, pretty analog type platforms.
The A4 had no radar. It had no bombing system. It was basically, World War II style bombers. You have the cross in front of you, get everything lined up and hit the button.
These limitations drove the need for smarter, more capable systems. The shift from analog to digital technology opens the door for true multi-role aircraft.
The A6, it had virtually no ability to really defend itself, certainly not from an offensive perspective. There would be fighters overhead that would provide that cover. That started to transition with the F-18, which really was the first kind of multi-role aircraft that the Navy was procuring from a fast jet fighter attack perspective for on the carrier.
By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the FA-18 Hornet emerges from this shift. Designed to replace both the F-4 Phantom II and the A-7 Corsair II, lightweight, durable, and built to withstand the rigorous demands of carrier operations, the Hornet becomes a key asset in naval aviation. It is also a major up-level into digital technology.
And then you fast forward to the world we have today, where it's heavily digital. Everything's digital. And there are networks that interact in ways that we couldn't have imagined when I first started here.
In the end, it was the F-18, and that was the first of the magic airborne computers, and its capability is outstanding. It's a superb fighter. I mean, 1v1, it's a superb fighter, and it's just as good at dropping bombs. And that's why they call it the F/A-18. And the beauty there is what was taking 6 or 7 sorties to take out one bridge in Vietnam, you could take an F-18 and do it with one flight and one bomb.
The F-18 was that first aircraft that was designed for putting bombs on target and being able to defend itself from an offensive perspective. And that started to transition naval aviation into a lot tighter group of airplanes that were being operated.
The United States went to war facing new tactics than in previous wars.
So when Desert Shield happened, we really had only prepared for refighting the Vietnam War. Desert Shield changed the tactics completely because you could not deliver ordnance below 20,000 feet or you get shot down. And as soon as Desert Shield and then followed by Desert Storm happened, I realized I'm in charge and I have to be in charge. I set up shift work and we worked 24/7 for the first probably month of Desert Shield, generating high altitude tactics for F-18s and A-6s and A-7s. To go home during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, to go home at night and watch what was happening was incredible. It's hard to describe what it feels like to see products that you have put your heart and soul into helping Naval Aviation achieve their mission.
The conflict with Iraq ended in early 1991 with a swift U.S. victory. Just months later, the Soviet Union collapsed, bringing the Cold War to a close. With no major global adversary remaining, the United States emerged as the world's only superpower. The new geopolitical landscape also triggered the largest post-war military drawdown since World War II. Beginning in 1988 and accelerating through the early 90s, the Defense Base Closure and Realignment Commission, or BRAC, reshaped the force structure. Many aviation squadrons were disestablished, reorganized, or consolidated. While numerous naval facilities were closed or realigned during the 5 rounds of BRAC, NAS Patuxent River and the state of Maryland ultimately saw a net gain. Between 1991 and 1995 alone, Pax River added more than 6,800 Department of Defense jobs. On September 11, 2001, the United States is attacked.
It's believed a 737 has crashed into this speculation at this point, but at least 3 floors taken out, crashed into the side of the building.
Debris raining down from 110 floors up. And I happened to have the 8 o'clock class that morning. We took a break at the hour point, and we had televisions located all around. At that point, they were repeating it when the first airplane flew into the towers. The reaction was, somebody made a mistake.
Can you think of any reason for a pilot to slam into a building of this height on a day like today if it wasn't intentional?
We went back into class, and within, 45 minutes later, the second airplane hit.
There was another one. We just saw another plane just flew into the second tower.
And they interrupted class and sent everybody on base was sent home.
Although Pax River was not directly involved in the attacks, its location just 60 miles southeast of the Pentagon meant that the base, which had once felt so isolated, now required stronger security measures.
Basically, everything changed. And it's been that way ever since.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations.
Suicide bombers, insurgent attacks, roadside bombs. The bloody litany goes on.
Body armor changed, helmets changed. Almost everything from the soldier up has changed in this war.
After the attacks of September 11, 2001, the United States entered a new kind of war, one without clear battle lines or a single adversary. What followed was a sustained global campaign across Afghanistan, Iraq, and beyond. The Global War on Terror. For Patuxent River, the mission shifted rapidly. Aircraft once built for Cold War dogfights were now being adapted for counterinsurgency, intelligence gathering, and long endurance operations over vast desert and mountainous terrain. The tempo at Pax increased. Engineers raced to equip aircraft with new sensors, communication systems, and defensive countermeasures tailored to threats like IEDs and shoulder-fired missiles. Test schedules accelerated, operational timelines compressed. The global war on terror would stretch on for 2 decades, becoming the longest conflict in U.S. history. And through it all, Pax River remained a critical node in adapting and advancing the tools of modern warfare. As technology and tactics are developed in accordance with world events, the multi-purpose aircraft entered a new age, with Pax River personnel taking a driving role in the development.
I actually started on F-35 before it was F-35. It was the Joint Advanced Strike Technology Program. Being on the F-35 team was just kind of the place to be at the time.
It was ex-airplane mentality. F-35 is it is a whole different game. There is a lot more thought about tactics and what can I do with the aircraft, more so than how to fly the aircraft. F-35 really brought the emphasis of the book is wide open with a blank sheet of paper for being able to create a complete system that not only supports the naval aviation enterprise, but works across all of the DoD's services. It was a really, really exciting time of flight test. I make a lot of jokes. When you see the aircraft do its magic, doing a hover and a vertical landing, don't marvel about the pilot doing it. The engineers made it simple. Marvel at the engineers. There was a tremendous amount of effort put into the 5th generation F-35 to hold the condition for the pilot. As a result, aircraft like the F-35B in the hover coming aboard the ship is an incredibly simple evolution compared to the Aviate-B that it replaces. It really is a straightforward aircraft for being able to learn to fly. And it is the transition for the aircrew to be able to spend more time in tactics training and weapons training, less time in how to fly the aircraft.
And we actually delivered a collaborative approach across the Air Force and the Navy, which some people said could not be done.
In the midst of a pandemic and heightened global tensions, the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson is preparing to deploy. This will be the first deployment with a newly integrated air wing, including the never-before-deployed CMV-22B Osprey and the F-35C Strike Fighter.
We got our fuel truck, so we'll be set here shortly.
But there is still work to do. The test team at Pax is charged with demonstrating that the Osprey can transport the 9,620-pound F-35 engine to the carrier fleet. This is the heaviest engine ever used in a carrier-based fighter. If the Osprey can't handle the load, which would allow mid-deployment repairs to the F-35, then the newly integrated air wing cannot deploy.
And that is going to be the furthest we've ever flown a V-22 without special refueling systems or aerial refueling use, and with a significant payload. So it's a big deal. Really, it starts the night before as I'm weather checking, trying to make sure it's going to be good for the next day. So when I wake up, immediately silence my alarm, weather checking again with all the paranoia that comes with flight test and seeing, am I going to make it today? The build up to a test flight around here is certainly well scripted as far as what I do every day. That's because if I deviate, I'm going to miss something.
How much extra do you think we'll have?
I think we're going to get into the holding stack with 2,700.
Yeah, we're thinking? I bet it's going to be more. I bet we'll be at about 32. We'll go at 30.
I like it. Taking bets.
Yep.
When I graduated from TPS, I knew I was coming to Navy V-22. So basically from the minute I checked in, all roads have been leading to this event.
You guys ready?
Ready. All set.
Okay. All right, we're here to brief Aircraft N1, test 110, flight 45, CMV perf, maximum range demo.
Good. Thanks, Scott.
I had never flown with these guys before until today, as it happened. So they do fly with the whole team a lot for various things, but I personally have not flown with my own test engineers until today. So it's a feel-good moment, which I try to have all the time.
Due to the unique struggle of the COVID-19 pandemic, carrier deployments are lasting months longer than usual. Many carriers are overdue for servicing, and the crews are overworked and missing home. The success of today's test is crucial in order for the USS Carl Vinson to deploy and relieve the fleet.
During the flight, we're going to get away from Pax River, get up to our altitude using a mission representative climb, and just start trucking.
6 hours after takeoff, the V-22 returns. The test has been a success, proving that the V-22 has the right stuff to meet the mission.
You have this whole team coming together in the cockpit with a common goal. It's just really cool to see everyone can come together and do that.
On August 2nd, 2021, the Carl Vinson successfully departs its home port in San Diego. It is the first carrier to deploy with the CMV-22B Osprey and the F-35C Strike Fighter.
Carrier onboard delivery is a critical mission to, Navy success as far as carriers go. Whether you need people, we need high priority parts because things break. And every once in a while, you need an Amazon Prime package while you're at sea for 6 months. And, a V-22 from now on will be the thing that brings it.
Now, Pax River is at the forefront of a new capability: unmanned aircraft.
I see the future having much, much more unmanned in our mix.
It's not just about naval aviation, it's about the whole fleet and giving the capability of aviation, that was a game changer in the first half of the century, totally changing warfare. And so I can give that tool of aviation to anybody now, to a ship, to a soldier on the battlefield.
When you think unmanned aviation, not a lot of people think about the smaller unmanned drones, but the smaller unmanned drones are really where you're going to see that huge technological advance.
Do you think you're going to get to go today? We're really hoping so.
The small unmanned world is developing rapidly with what is coming out of Ukraine and Russia and that war. There are missions executed that a group of 8 Marines would do before. So delivering, say, bullets to the front lines, you would send a group of people out to execute that mission. The unmanned technology is allowing one item to go into harm's way, and it's not even a person. It will save lives, but there are some problems and challenges that are really difficult to solve. You're taking parts and pieces that typically wouldn't be put together in order to facilitate what the need is, what the problem is.
I think that a human decision element is always going to be important in aviation, specifically in tactical aviation. I do see more and more of the basic functions of the aircraft being taken over by autopilot systems. I'm sure that almost everyone has heard of the AI that did some dogfighting simulations with a pilot and beat the pants off of him. And I don't know whether we're ever going to allow an AI or a robot to make a life and death decision in an aircraft. I think that decision is always going to rely with a human at the controls in some form or another.
Technology is ever changing. Unleashing your mind to think of ways to use technology in ways that has never been done before, being innovative and creative, and having the knowledge to do so, having the technical underpinning to allow you to use your mind in ways that just unleash your creativity.
So the Navy operates on a landscape here that came already with a complement of plants and animals here, and it's our job to be stewards of those, to take care of those.
First we're going to walk on a beach, then we're going to walk on a trail, then we're going to come to a landing zone, and all along there terrapins have laid nests.
More species, endangered species, occur on DoD lands than those managed by any other federal agency.
We've got, let's see, raccoons, fox, skunk, possibly coyote.
We tried to manage the species here to keep them from plunging, over the edge into the world of listing as an endangered species, and we've done that with good cooperation from the Navy. There are plenty of examples where rare species, endangered species have impacted military missions, even shut down operations.
And in order to be able to continue its mission, to carry it out unimpeded, we have to find ways for those two to coexist. So an active management program either manages the endangered species in one place and the mission in another. Our base environmental program goes all the way back to the early 1970s. pre-Earth Day, pre the big environmental movement in this country. And I think because of our early intervention, because of our management and the cooperation with the military operators here, we've been able to keep that from happening. Creating alternate landing zones, just a communication, win-win situation.
Here's the first one there. I'm sure they're all hatched. Look at it. It's so cute. We can put some water on him afterward and see his colors.
Wow. 5.9 grams?
Yeah.
The Navy, probably more than any installation, has got to address the impacts of sea level rise. The military service, it's a coastal service mostly. And this species right here, this diamondback terrapin, may be a great monitor, great indicator species for the impacts of sea level rise. We may hold the future of the survival of this species, at least in the middle of Chesapeake Bay here at Pax River. That's quite an obligation. I look back on almost a 40-year career, and what I like most is I believe I actually see evidence of my hand, my management, my impact on this landscape here. This land that we occupy here on the Patuxent River Naval Air Station, it's being used by the Navy right now, but it belongs to the public. It belongs to every citizen of the United States. You, Navy, may use it for whatever period of time you need to use it, but you need to take care of it.
Innovations occurring in naval aviation today still find their genesis in the standardized training originally developed by Sherby, Trapnell, and others.
It is by far the biggest of the flight test schools. So when we talk flight test schools in the world, we generally talk the big four. One in France, one in the United Kingdom, Naval Test Pilot School in Patuxent River, Maryland, and then Air Force Test Pilot School at Edwards Air Force Base. And Naval Test Pilot School graduates more flight test professionals every year than the other three combined.
We bring people from many different backgrounds and we put them through this rigorous course, and they have to work together because nothing in the world of flight test is done on your own anymore. There's no one person out there flying at the edge of the envelope all by themselves. It's a huge team effort.
Patuxent River as a school, as a test pilot school, of course, is a unique experience because of what they have to accomplish in a limited amount of time, getting you through a syllabus that really requires 36 hours a day, no sleeping involved, so that you, on the other end, can fly anything and evaluate it to a specific purpose.
And the students that show up here are definitely the cream of the crop.
They tend to be the people that, if there's a rule for something, say, how come? In other words, where did that come from? I think they're intellectually curious. They know that the school's tough. They know it's one of the toughest, most challenging schools in the military.
The Navy Test Pilot School has far and away the best academic instructors of any place I've ever gone to school. They said J.J. McHugh could teach differential equations to a rock, and I believe it. He made mathematics, high-level mathematics, come alive by relating them to the aircraft.
One of the things that I really love about the military aviation and the flight test community, projects will come in and they will be a long project. They'll often be much longer than any military personnel's tour of duty. But they will move the football during that time, and then somebody else who doesn't even know them will pick it up and run with it.
It's fun to think about the legacy of test aviation. If you walk through the halls of the test pilot school and you look at the names on the wall, and some of those names, especially from some of the earlier classes, those are household names. Those are names that everybody knows. You look at mission commanders that have gone to the space, that have gone to the moon. A lot of those guys were test pilot school graduates. Names that you grew up with as a kid that were heroes. It's like, oh hey, they went to the same school I did. They were here in this building. They were in these classrooms. They were in these hangars. They worked on this base, and I get to be a part of that.
I love seeing where it's gone and where it's going.
Houston ACR, this is Space Station. We have you loud and clear. You learn how to adapt so well at test pilot school. You're given a new aircraft. You're given, 5 days to learn that aircraft, and then you go fly it and do an evaluation on that. That's much like what we do in the astronaut lives up here on the International Space Station.
I remember very specifically, our skipper asked our class 130, if anybody wanted to be an astronaut. And it was pretty impressive to see some of the most incredible pilots in the world all raise their hand.
Where would I like to see my career go? Well, NASA, if you're listening.
I'm the commanding officer for 18 months. It's humbling and it's an honor. You get to provide an influence, you get to shepherd the team, and then you get to recognize the talent that's coming in behind you that's going to carry the proverbial football a little bit farther down the field.
Today, the base continues to serve as a critical testing ground for advanced aircraft and aviation technologies, sustaining the U.S. Naval Aviation Enterprise's combat edge over adversaries.
Well, I contend that they commissioned the base April 1st, 1943. It wasn't complete, and it's never been complete. It's always a very dynamic, growing place. There's always something being built here.
Although it'll be a sad day when the very last F-18 is on sticks. When there's an F-18 on sticks at a museum, I can look at it and say, I flew that, I tested that, I made that a better airplane.